This video is brought to you by knockoff board games like Who's Left, where you can be the detective. Wonder Woman didn't play out like Suicide Squad or even Rogue One. Details on what was left out are scarce. In fact, according to director Patty Jenkins, there are no deleted scenes. Now enjoy another 10 or so minutes of a black screen. However, there's a bunch of concept art that details alternate character designs and tweaks to existing scenes that if you want to check out, you can skip to here. But I thought before that, it might be a good opportunity to get into the Wonder Woman film projects that never made it, that were deleted, if you will. Look, I just wanted to call this video deleted scenes like the other ones I've made. I'm sorry, alright? But to make up for it, there's a Loot Crate giveaway at the end. Happens every week. In the mid-90s, comic book movies were booming. I mean, most of them weren't very good, but I guess it was the best they could do at the time. Batman Forever, Judge Dredd, Spawn, Richie Rich, Steel, Casper, A Spirited Beginning, Boobs Wire, Time Cop. Yeah, that was a comic. I only just realized that. Casper Meets Wendy. All classics in their own way. So with all these properties being given the big screen treatment, it made a lot of sense to add Wonder Woman to the list. Obviously, no films happened. I suspect it's because she's too earnest of a character for the 90s, because everything had to be so edgy and radical, which explains why Superman was very nearly Nicolas Cage with a mullet. Anyways, in 1996, Ivan Reitman was attached to the project as producer, with the story being that he'd also direct. Seems like a good fit, getting the guy behind Ghostbusters, and apparently he worked on it for something like 6 years with multiple writers. After a last-ditch effort in 98 to get it off the ground, his version was shelved, and it then went to hairdresser/producer/lunatic John Peters, and then when he did nothing with it, it went to producer Joel Silver. Apparently, that version was to have Sandra Bullock in the lead, but apparently it was only really Wonder Woman in name. She was turned into a spy who flew around the world doing all sorts of... Look, I don't really know. There's barely any info on it, but probably murdering a bunch of people if it's a DC movie. Anyways, this version was eventually scrapped in 2003, and then a different take saw Wonder Woman die 10 pages in. And then her costume crawls off her body and heads for the nearest city, and then finds Donna Troy, and from there it's basically female Spider-Man. You know, she's learning new powers and whatnot. Turns out though, she was also the daughter of Wonder Woman. Twist! And then Wonder Woman shows up again to be like, you could do it, you're the best or something, but then she dies. Other stuff happens, I don't know. One of the many writers brought on board to fix this was Laeta Kalogridis, definitely not pronounced like that, who recognized the problem with the script. That being, Wonder Woman was more known at that point as a visual icon than anything else. Most people didn't know the first thing about her, and her version was going to be a lot like what we got in 2017. Steve Trevor crashes on the island, the villain was Ares, and probably other things also. That version, you guessed it, was made and everybody saw it. Not really, it was out, they threw it away, and Joss Whedon was brought in to give it a go. I'd imagine his version would probably now be made, now that we're post-Avengers. I mean, of course it would. He's now taken over the Justice League film, and he's going to be taking on Batwoman. His version began the same way. Steve Trevor crashing on the island, but then what follows is a battle between Hippolyta and Diana to decide his fate. Also, it was to be set in the modern day and told from Steve Trevor's perspective. At one point, Wonder Woman takes a bullet directly in the chest, causing her to black out for a few hours. And the villain was going to be Strife, giving bloody Diana a bit of bloody strife by defeating her twice in battle before being bested at the end. Also, the final confrontation had her battling a three-headed mechanical chimera. Ares doesn't appear, however his presence is teased, and it was thought that he'd turn up in a sequel. Joss Whedon has also cited Colby Smulders as his choice for the role. Up next isn't a Wonder Woman solo film, but she was going to appear in George Miller's Justice League. This didn't happen for a few reasons, but it got real close. The release of this film though, it coincided with the Dark Knight trilogy, and Nolan didn't like the idea of two Batmen existing simultaneously, the other being that of Armie Hammer. Also, this all happened around the time of a writer's strike, plus a change in Australia's rebate legislation for filmmaking. Wonder Woman was to be played by Megan Gale, and this is an actual image of what she would have looked like. She was going to be a spokesperson to the UN, and also the voice of the metahuman community. It was loosely based on a few stories, including the Tower of Babel, where Batman's methods of taking down the Justice League are stolen, and another one was the OMAC project, which ends in Wonder Woman snapping Maxwell Lord's neck. This, however, was changed to Batman for the final film. This idea in some form, though, seems to have bled over into Man of Steel. Warner Brothers and DC were just hell-bent on getting someone's neck broken. Bless him. The last one on the list comes from Nicholas Winding Refn, the director of Drive. He mentioned in passing that he hoped to make a $200 million extravaganza. His version never seemed to get further than a casual conversation, but he did mention that he would have liked to have cast Christina Hendricks as Diana Prince. So this year's version actually trialed a few directors before settling on Patty Jenkins. Another Ghostbusters helmer, Paul Feig, pitched a Wonder Woman film to Warner Brothers that was a kind of lighter action comedy that tonally was more in line with Iron Man. The story would have had Wonder Woman bumping the glass ceiling of the superhero world and having to contend with heroes like Batman and Superman who might not be as forward-thinking. Michelle Maclaren was officially signed on, but left before filming began in 2015 due to creative differences. The story goes that her version would have alienated fans due to some severe deviation from the comics, with one rumor in particular citing that Diana was to have a sidekick tiger that she could talk with. Aside from neither of these last two pictures sounding like stellar ideas, do you know how expensive a CGI tiger is? The one from Life of Pi literally bankrupted the special effects company who created it. Then they won an Oscar for it. So small blessings, I guess. McLaren's version was also described as being more like Braveheart, but Warner Brothers wanted something less action heavy with more story. Alright, now despite Patty Jenkins saying nothing was cut from Wonder Woman, and there will apparently be no deleted scenes on the Blu-ray, producer Charles Roven has clarified that there was some additional photography in the film. However, this was all interscene. This also wasn't a case of a film needing a whole lot of reshoots to fix any obvious plot problems, but there were some minor touches to make the whole thing more seamless. One such moment was that Patty Jenkins thought that there needed to be some more brutality leading up to the trench sequence. So to cater to this and to ramp up tension, the moment where the horse is being whipped was added. This was actually something in the original script, and it ended up appearing in the exact moment that it was originally intended. Okay, concept art. Now, although Patty Jenkins didn't have a hand in casting, she inherited Gal Gadot from Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman. One thing that she wanted to change from that film was the color palette. A big focus was to be on the use of rich blacks and saturated colours, unlike the look of a lot of period films. Also, despite what we see here, which is a look at the early throne room on Themyscira, the idea was to create natural living spaces rather than change landscapes. That's also why a lot of what was built kind of fits around what was already there. There is one exception to this though. That is the armory that holds the Godkiller sword, Wonder Woman's shield and costume, plus the lasso of truth. That was designed to be more closed off, with only one entrance in or out that was always guarded. It also stands apart from everything else, making it nearly impossible to enter. Unless, what's happening here. There's also a few different designs for where the God-Killer and the like were housed. We also have some early designs for the Amazons. Presumably this one for Hippolyta happened before the role was cast. And there's also a stack of alternate designs available for the residents of Themyscira that in general don't stray too far from what we ended up with. The battle sequence on the beach, which was also an early concept, played out slightly differently in that the arrows fired into the German soldiers were lit on fire. Maybe this was thought too much for a film of this rating. I don't know. The Amazons themselves in real life were made up of various athletes from a variety of backgrounds. I'm assuming this is so they all just didn't have the same basic build. There were some crossfitters, martial artists, and also triathletes. Mark Twight was behind the additional training. He's also the guy that made the 300 guys look like the 300 guys, plus got Henry Cavill to look like this for Man of Steel, and he's also worked on every other DC EU property. Though maybe not Suicide Squad. I don't know. The Wonder Woman costume itself isn't altered too much from Batman v Superman. The only real obvious difference is that it's lighter. Also, if you're wondering how her tiara stays on, well, it's got a bit of elastic at the back. The civilian clothes she wears is also based off an outfit of the first ever female army members unit, so this is kind of the prototype of that. The blue dress she wore was also originally envisioned to be green, but because that was the villain's color, that ended up being changed. There's also a few alternate designs for Steve Trevor, in most of which he has shorter hair. Chris Pine actually invented his own backstory for the character. Something along the lines of that maybe he's jaded because he lost a love or his family in the war. I didn't really get a sense of that, but maybe Chris Pine, the actor, made Steve Trevor a really good actor who could act like he didn't used to have a family. There's also some early looks at Etta Candy, Sir Patrick Morgan, and Samir. Ludendorff also had a slightly different appearance before he was cast. This guy was actually a real person. I think he might be the only character in the film who's based off a historical figure. He was chosen because he believed, for real, that war was humanity's natural state, and he even survived the First World War to help lay the groundwork for the Nazi Party. Yeah, so real bad bloke. Dr. Maru had a different design from the comics, but the same color palette was kept. Her faceplate is based off those seen at the time, and in this image, you can see at one point they were going to go with something a little bit different. This concept of Ares is also pretty much how he ended up looking in the final battle. I mean, there was a lot of CGI lightning and smoke, so I'm not 100% on that. In the No Man's Land sequence, it also seemed at one point that Wonder Woman would have left the trenches still in her cloak. Also, she actually performed the running for this scene in trainers, so that she'd have speed and ease of movement. And then they were digitally removed in post-production, and the boots were added, which I thought was neat. And you want another interesting fact? This photo was taken on the first day of shooting, presumably so it could be inserted into Batman v Superman before that film came out. But the scene itself was shot on day 70. That's the magic of filmmaking, and also the magic of photography coming together. Alright, is the winner of last week's Loot Crate. If you are this person, just private message me these details and it's all yours. And if you want to win next week's box, just leave any comment below. Perhaps on a cancelled project you would have liked to have seen make it to completion. Personally, I think the one we got sounded infinitely better than most of the ones mentioned, but hey, maybe that's just me. Also, if you like video games, every Tuesday a show happens here called Caravan of Garbage, where we play a crap or sometimes a good thing. Here's a clip. I am shocked that you are still alive.
Right?
It blows my mind.
Do you mean
in real life? Yes.
In real life, exactly, yeah.
You have some very unhealthy habits and some very unsavory friends.
That's true.
You know what? I would have loved this.
Ooh, I got a key.
Back in...
Should I go up and get the key?
I don't. Yeah, you have to get it twice. What? And if you like podcasts, you can find me every week on The Weekly Planet, where we always talk movies and comics and TV shows. That's linked below along with everything else. But thanks for watching this. I appreciate it. Take care.